I'm Martin Jarvis, and once again I want to welcome you to another perspective. Today we're going to talk about a lot of stuff, but the underlying purpose is so that we might be well in life and enjoy life and have a most prosperous life. I believe that most of us in this nation, as well in the world particularly, are living lives far beyond our potential, our possibilities. And I think it simply at times boils down to just a mistaken understanding of who we are and our place in this universe. I want to suggest first that, and I think we know that we have a limited time on this planet. We come into the world, we live for a time, and then we pass away. When we're young, it seems like we have so much time, and we're not really concerned about our longevity. And I know that myself coming up, I was always the youngest. I was in school a year early, so I was in school with folks that were about a year or so older than me. I joined the military at 17. I was always so young. But throughout my life, there became a point where I wasn't that young person anymore. And now I'm going to be 68 on my next birthday, 2025. I turned 67 in November. Where did the time fly? What I want to suggest today is that when I compare myself, or at least compare myself to the other elements in the universe, I begin to recognize that all elements, all things in our universe, per our physicist, our quantum physicist, are all these elements and all these things have particular characteristics, okay? And many of the characteristics are not really explainable, like the uncertainty principle, entanglement theory, and a bunch of other stuff, gravity even. They're understood that they exist because of the effects that they have, but to understand why, it's beyond the scientist. So we just concern ourselves with understanding that rather than understanding why, and that certain things have unique characteristics. And I want to suggest that we, as a part of this universal mix, we are simply part of it, and we ourselves have particularly unique characteristics and character traits. One thing I always like to focus on is, and it's sort of a hot topic, between the religious folks and the science community, is that we are all spiritual. And because spiritual automatically conjures up this idea of religious affiliation. But what I want to suggest is that spiritual is simply the invisible part of us as human beings, where that's what differentiates us from our bodies. We are not our bodies. We are in control of these bodies. We are functioning within these bodies in one way or another, but we are not these bodies. And as weird as that might seem, I want to compare it to the other elements and the other things that we have found in this universe. That, again, we understand what, we just don't understand how. And so we can understand easily that we are not our bodies, that we are inside, and that when this body is laying in a casket, we are not there, because we are the animated part of these bodies. And what I want to suggest is, and even using it from a universe perspective, the concept of entropy, and recognize then that when we come into this world born, animating this body, the body is young, the body is new, and has a lot of years attached to it. And I want to simply suggest that, some say that from the moment we're born, we are in the process of dying. I don't want to look at it that way, but it could be seen that way. I want to look at it like when we come into this world as a young infant, that we have a particular point where we're just growing and we're prospering and we're evolving greatly. But then we come to a particular peak point and then we start deteriorating. Okay, and then finally the old age sets in. And what I want to suggest is all that old age is, all the process is, and then the old age part is when we begin separating ourselves from this body that we've been inhabiting. Okay? I'm going to look at it kind of like, when they say the dark matter that is in the universe, that is ever expanding the universe. And that eventually expanding so much that all of our neighbors, all of the planets, and all the things that we are close to will become so much more further apart. And then there is no longer existence. And I want to see that same concept with our bodies as well, as we begin aging, as the spirit part of us begins separating ourselves from these bodies. That is what the attributes of the age begin to manifest. And so all is not lost. In a sense that, first of all, there is simply a transition to something else of which we don't know, but we do know, or we do kind of can believe from a universe mixed perspective, that when these bodies lay down and we continue somewhere, some sort, who knows, okay? But what I want to suggest, even giving this analogy, that we have the ability to prolong our life a lot longer than we have. That one of the unique characteristics of us in this universal mix is that we have control over things, so much control, much more control than we've given ourselves credit for. I mean, when you look at us and you look around at the discoveries that we've made and the things that we have created, the technology and all the stuff, we are very unique. We may be a part of the universal mix, but we are a very unique part of it in that we have the ability to create things. And what I want to suggest is, and focus on, that this creativity that we have is based on thoughts, is based on ideas, and then taking the actions to bring those thoughts and ideas into fruition, okay? We know that, and it makes perfect sense. But what I want to suggest is that we have that ability is innate within us, within who we really are, that spiritual part of us. This is part of our unique characteristics. And what I want to suggest is, with that same idea, with the same thought process, with the same ingenuity, we have the ability to create, not just by our hands, but by our will, okay, by our thoughts, by our beliefs. And that's what we are subject to. And so we age, our body ages, we begin separating from this body, I believe, prematurely. Okay? I think we look back at our parents and our grandparents and all these old people that came before us, and they've given us an idea of what it is meant to be that particular age, and we simply buy into it. So what we are doing is we are manifesting our physical traits in reflection of what we believe we should be. Our beliefs are manifesting our old age quicker than I believe it needs to be. Okay? And so just recognize that, I would say, as a particularly unique trait that we have as human beings. Okay? We have a lot more power than we give ourselves credit for. We have a lot more potential. And we even use the word potential. Potential kind of means the ultimate that an individual can achieve when they're born. And I've spoken on this many times in the past, that the older you grow, the environment, the experience that you have, your potential lessens and lessens, okay? And that is from a natural perspective, a classical perspective, okay? But from a more evolved perspective, what I want to suggest is that based on your belief, and your ever evolving beliefs, hopefully as your worldview begins to expand, you begin to become more enlightened, your potential increases, okay? So that's the purpose of education, that's the purpose of striving for good health, that's the purpose for thought and meditation, for grasping all the information you can get and considering it logically and deeply, is that as your worldview expands, your potential expands, okay? Now, if you don't increase mentally, if your worldview remains as it is, okay, your potential will not increase. As a matter of fact, that's when your potential begins to decrease and decrease and decrease, because whatever life you're living, whatever lifestyle you're living, if it's not balanced out with an expanded worldview, you're simply living until you die. And that potential that's before you does not increase, okay? And it's very important to see that in the decisions that we make. Sometimes we make ridiculous decisions that begin to drastically lower our potential. You know, like breaking laws and going to jail, and not eating healthy and losing our health, or not exercising and losing our health. Many things are blowing our money and losing our finances, blowing our relationships, you know, all these things that are self-destructive tendencies, okay? We need to wise up. We need to recognize and understand. And sometimes we do, sometimes we get these hints, you know, along the same lines of this whole quantum, you know, universe thing is this idea that I believe where déjà vu happens, you know, that the déjà vu comes into play. Now, and when the whole quantum mechanic theories and all, there's this multiverse suggestion that every action that you take creates a new universe based on what direction you went or what direction you could have gone that you didn't. Another universe is created throughout your lives. Now that's kind of unbelievable to me, and doesn't even make sense that every particular decision and every choice that every human being makes on this planet creates a whole new universe. That might work out mathematically, but that's nonsense, okay? What I see more realistic is that there are certain times then in an individual's life where there might be those opportunities to make a choice, make that choice. Not that every single choice creates a universe, but that there are particular times in individual's life, particular benchmarks where those choices are made. And it can be pretty, you know, considered in this whole a déjà vu thing, okay? Now we understand, you know, that we have this déjà vu, and I know I've been here before, I know this situation has happened before, and a lot of times doctors and scientists will write that off, saying it's sort of like a brain fart, you know, or something that happened in your brain that just makes you think that way, but you know good and well that was something that you experienced before, or you knew that it was going to happen, or you dreamed it, however you want to realize it. And I don't know about you, but I've had many opportunities where I'd have this déjà vu, and I'd remember from the previous time that I made a particular decision and it didn't turn out well. So I will intentionally make the opposite decision that I made in that previous rendering of that situation. And the situation turns out fine. And so that right there might be, the déjà vus in our lives might be that intersecting place where we have a choice to be made that might create that multiverse, okay? Or at least give us an opportunity to make the right move given this, I want to say, warning or heads up that we've been given. It's kind of hard to know exactly what or how or why, but we know what we experience, okay? And so that might be something of the uniqueness of our characteristics in this universal mix, that we have the ability to see what possibility might be prior to it manifesting itself in our reality, okay? Something that has to be considered. I mean, if we consider there's an entanglement theory, we can also recognize that we might be able to view a situation from the past that either happened or giving us an opportunity to make a change so that won't happen in our future. Okay, very interesting. It's also watching some scientists talk about the anti-matter, anti-atoms, and the anti-universe and all this thing, just the opposite of what we are, and that was pretty intriguing, but also unbelievable. I think the unbelievable part is when you take the math and you make it make sense, and then you try to dumb it down, I guess, for us, you know, the regular guys out there, just in listening to your conversations with intrigue, is like using the example of a cracked egg, you know, in our particular reality of this positive universe, that we can crack an egg and the egg spill out, but in the anti-universe, the egg contents puts itself back in the egg. That's not it. I believe that if you were somehow able to visit or to be a part of the anti-universe, it would just be exactly like this here. You wouldn't realize this, that would just be your reality. But everything, the egg would crack the same way, the clocks would run the same way, and all that stuff. But anyway, that's something interesting to think about. I don't really see how it's relevant to our lives today. Unless, of course, you know, I know what's interesting is I've had this, I had a little situation when I was younger in a foreign country. And was where I shouldn't have been, and I had a choice of either coming back to the States or staying there. But I think if I had stayed there, it wouldn't have turned out too well, and I was glad that I came back. But I've had this recurring dream for about the past 35 years of me in that environment, in that foreign country, just surviving. And not really in a positive place, but not really in a depressive place, but in a dark place, moving from situation to situation, living in various situations that were just dark, and I was alone. And I still have that dream periodically. And I wonder if I am getting a vision of the potential that could have been that I avoided, or am I getting a picture of that other universe? You know, of the choice not been made, the choice that I made, that other situation. I mean, it's plain as day. I don't know if anybody else has had dreams like this, but these are very real to me, and it's the same recurring dream constantly. I wish there was some way I could get in there and help that guy, you know, get to some place that was positive, but you know, who knows? You know, the thing is that as we begin to just see ourselves, as we see ourselves simply as we are, this person who's born and lives and interacts and all this stuff, we see nothing out of the ordinary really about déjà vu or that dream, that situation that I just described. But when we recognize that we are not really a part of these bodies, that we are a part of the universal mix, and just like everything else in the universe have particular characteristics, we have our unique characteristics as well. And we shouldn't really be taking lightly any of the things that might seem spooky. It's not really spooky, just unique characteristics of us in this universal mix, you know. I think sometimes, you know, even when I consider the religions, and you know, I'm a minister, I'm a Christian minister, I have been for like 40 or so years, but I'm not religious. Because I came from a place of being an atheist, to having this epiphany that there was something greater than me. And I began to walk this walk, but walked it with my eyes open. And so what I recognize is that there is a connection between us and the scientists. But what we see, and the religious folks see a disconnect between us and the scientific community, as well the scientific community sees themselves as disconnected to the religious folks, as the religions being absolutely ridiculous. And I think both of them are not really seeing properly. And they're both discounting a very important part of their own particular belief system that would fill in the gaps of what might seem to be ridiculous to them, or what might seem to be a gap where they just can't cross the line to make whatever it is they're embracing make sense, okay? See, when I look at the scientists, I look at the religions as having been scientists. In that their religions were making an observation and coming to a conclusion as far as why this was or how this was. And even the concept of God, in a sense, was that this earth and all the stuff we see had to be created by somebody, because we know that the things that we are involved in, we create. So if there's something greater than us that we are a part of, we must have been part of the creation of a hand of someone else. It must have been God. It must have been Allah. It must have been Yahweh. It must have been Krishna, or something outside of ourselves, but we had to have been created. So here we go with the religions. Okay, so if we're created, then what is the expectation of us, of the Creator, and how special are we? And when things go negative in the environment or negative in our family lives, is because I've displeased the Creator, and when things go positive, it's because I've pleased the Creator. So we created these religions. And now you might think, you know, that's anti-religion. How do you as a minister even come up with something like that? Well, we'll have to say, look, human beings, you know, in one form or another, have been on this planet for about 2 million years, okay? and what we call modern humans, not like us exactly, but modern humans have been on this planet for like 200 to 300,000 years, okay? Now the religions have been on this planet for about 6,000 years, okay? So do the math. Where were the religions, 200 to 300,000 years ago? They were non-existent. But we were here. So then I see the religion then as like the scientists, when it came to a point of past simply surviving, having to come up and try to understand how things are, and hence the religions. But even before that, way back, I would go even to that 200,000-year-old human being, fire, cold, rain, whatever. They had to figure stuff out. They had to observe it, consider it, figure it out, and then figure out how to use it, how to take the skins off of animals and use them for clothing, how to cook, how to eat, how to survive the seasons and all, how to tend to your newborn, all these things. These were scientific, just very elementary scientific, but scientific nonetheless. But then as we got into the religious aspect of human beings, and which was like science, trying to understand what they couldn't figure out, that the primary scientists, even that we look back on today, were religious folks. Some of them were monks, some of them were in the religious orders, because they were scientists, they were intrigued, they had to discover, had to understand why. And came to a place where at times they found themselves at odds with their religious leadership, like, the entire universe doesn't revolve around the earth, or all the planets and the sun and all this stuff don't revolve around, that we are not the center of everything, that was at odds with the church, because God created everything for us. And so when we're not the center, that's problematic, okay? And so I think that where we have dropped the ball then as religious folks is just stop trying to learn, stop trying to understand. And then we have dropped the ball as science as far as trying to just negate everything the religions have come up with. Now again, since the religions have only been here for like 6,000 years, without a doubt they were made up by men. By the hands of men, the text, the writings, the scripts and all that stuff. Scriptures, all written by the hands of men. They were made up. And what you'll find is even crossing cultural and religious lines were certain stories that were taken from here, taken from there, and then claimed to be this, at all. Now, I'm not discounting what we might consider deity, what we might consider advanced intelligence. I'm simply saying the justifications, the books and the writings, many of the stuff that people have come up with were simply created by men, maybe with good intentions, of course, but still created by men. Now what I do want to suggest, and I suggested in one of our previous programs, is that scattered throughout religious texts, throughout all religious texts, are particular, what I would call nuggets, valuable nuggets of insight into the unknown, this whole idea of quantum physics, which has really intrigued the world scientific community for the past 100 years. You can find those sprinkled through religious texts. You can find stuff like, the uncertainty principle, where you don't know what something is until you open the box and there's Schrodinger's cat, it's dead or alive, whatever it is. But then you have the religious text telling you that you believe that faith is the evidence of things not seen. And that when you believe that it's there, eventually it's going to manifest. Okay? And then what's it going to be? Well, Scripture also tells you that God, the deity, the intelligence is going to deliver something that's greater and probably better than what you ever even imagined it to be. So that's really not knowing what it is until it's open. So I'm saying is, in a way, the things that we're understanding, even even the entanglement theory, where something is here and something is there, in heaven as it is on earth, you know, and believing it before you see it, because it is there, and because of your belief, it's going to manifest. Because of your faith, it's going to manifest. These are concepts right out of quantum physics. Even time travel in the beginning of the bending of time, and people coming from the past manifesting themselves to people in the present. I mean, come on now. So what I'm suggesting is simply that although these religious writings were made by men, throughout the religious writings will be nuggets that we could find and attach ourselves onto. And so what I'm simply suggesting here is for the religious folks not to be so entrenched in their own particular religions, which were created by men, that they'd miss the entire picture, okay? And now, so you said, well, Martin, you're supposed to be a minister. How do you square that with the concept of God, okay? That's easy for me. Because what I consider is that, first of all, there's a lot that we just don't know. I mean, there's a lot that we've always not known. And even the scientific journey, even through science and regular science, and then classical physics, and then quantum physics and all this, we're simply trying to learn stuff. We're at the baby stage, I believe. But it's not difficult for me to see this universe, that we're ever trying to understand all that's going on within the universe. The question for me then is, possibly, what's outside our universe? In other words, what is our universe contained in? A giant petri dish? because as large as we think we are, and as we're examining all these things that we're seeing the quarks, we're seeing the protons, we're seeing the neutrons, we're seeing the particles and waves and photons, all this stuff that when we consider the entirety of the universe and all these things that we are observing, we're no larger than any of the other stuff. We're all just minute particles, okay? And so given that, I try to consider maybe, and this is very difficult for most people, not for me. Suppose we create something. We take a cracker, you know, put water on it or moisture on it, cover it in a jar, and wait for about, 2 weeks. Little green stuff is going to start appearing. And it's going to grow, and it's going to grow. Now, whatever's growing, from the perspective of that which is growing, what does their universe look like to them? And without them even really realizing it, they're simply contained in a jar that we have created them in. Or you can take a look at a dog running around with little bacteria and things growing inside of it, even positive things or negative things to the dog, but to the things, their life. What does their universe look like? So I'm saying it's arrogance for us to believe, but it could be true, that this is it. And there's nothing greater, there's nothing outside. So then you ask, well, how do I see what we call God, what we call Allah, what we call Yahweh, Krishna, whatever? It's not difficult if we're living in this petri dish. An intelligence that is greater than us. Go back to that saltine cracker and that stuff that's growing on that cracker. What is the possibility of whatever is growing there conceiving of, even understanding what its creator actually is? And if it came to a point of where it could think and evolve in such a way over 100,000 or 200,000 years that it could think and see stuff, still, it would never come to the place where it could understand the attributes of me. I am an intelligence. I'm not God, but to them I'm God. And it's very important to see that. We consider ourselves to be the center, the largest, the observers, the explorers and all. Yes, we are. But what is our universe contained in? It's It's very important. And I think in all humility, I mean, you know, and when I look at stuff, and you know, we talk about the evolution, and I understand because the greatest minds, you know, will reject what I'm telling you right now. But I think that look, when I came into the reality of there being deity, something greater than me, I was raised in the church. That I went in the military at 17, and I became an atheist for like 10 years. At 28, I had this epiphany that there was something greater, and I sought to follow. But my commitment to me and to what I was following was that I was going to be walking with my eyes open. I wasn't going to just accept what some religion said and just buy into that. That's what I did as a kid. But if this is for real, and I believe it is, I have to find out what's really going on. And this is the journey that I've been on. Okay? And so I don't have the constraints of, that's not what the religion says, you know. No. And I don't have the constraints of, there can be no religion, you know. I mean, now look, to be honest with you, the religion is problematic. But I think correlating the religion to deity or to the intelligence or to whatever it is that we attributed the religion to, you know, that might be an issue. And I think that's where the scientists come from. They're just looking at the religion and spirituality saying it can't be true. And of course it can't be true. But could there be an intelligence that we have named that is so far beyond us because that we have simply named as God, named as Allah, named as Yahweh, named as Krishna, because we can't conceive of its existence or attributes or even a possibility outside our anthropomorphic Father, you know. So when I pray, you know, so I understand that. But when I look around, you know, even from a scientific perspective, because I've always enjoyed science, and I kind of believe there's deity, what we call deity, which would simply be an intelligence far beyond us. Is that look at even all the scientific predictions and all the stuff that we've come up with, and the discoveries even in the quantum physics realm, has always been based on math, on perfect math. Now that right there tells you, perfect math? You can figure out all this stuff with perfect math? Doesn't that, come on now. And we look at, you know, I look at the symmetry of things. I look at the fact that all creatures have pretty much the same internal organs as each other, you know, somewhat. I look at everything in the entire universe is made of the same substances. I mean, come on now. So it's kind of hard. So me, I have no problem believing that there is an intelligence that we are simply dwelling in the petri dish of. And I know that might be a shot to our ego as far as our importance goes, but it makes perfect sense. And so as far as we can go into the universe, as far as we can go up or out or miles and hundreds of millions of miles, there's just stuff out there. But imagine that cracker with that stuff growing on it, or any other kind of mini biosphere that we might be able to manufacture. I mean, its environment is as large as you want it to be, but to a microscopic creature, this jar that you have placed their little cracker in is immense, okay? And in all humility, that might be very well where we are, and that could be what God is, what we have called God, simply an intelligence. And all the stuff that we have attributed to this intelligence, you know, like the destruction of each other and the segregation of each other and the mistreatment and enslavement and all the stuff that we've done to each other, couldn't possibly be, you know, the intention. So in all, yeah, I've probably created more questions than I've answered. But I think the bottom line is that we have the ability to be just about anything we desire to be. We have the ability to manifest our realities based on our belief, okay? And that's one of our unique characteristics in this universal mix. But not simply believing, but then creating the actions necessary to bring that belief to fruition. I believe we could live 50, 60, 70 years longer than we have been. I could believe that we could be much prosperous, much more happy than we've ever imagined. But it just takes a change of a mindset, recognizing that we have the ability to create whatever environment, whatever desire we have in our lives, within reason and all. But we just don't do it. We just don't do it because too often we think, oh well, our fate's already been written. Oh well, what's going to happen is going to happen. These are things that I used to believe. But no, whatever you desire in life, you can make manifest. And you can make it from a classical reality or a quantum reality, but just believe it and manifest it. And part of that manifesting is doing what it takes to make it work. And that's pretty much it. We are given these bodies for a very limited amount of time, but I believe we can make these bodies last a lot longer than we have. I think we bought in too much into what age, like for me, at 67 years old, what's 67-year-old supposed to look like? My pop, my granddad, or whatever? Or can I redefine, for me at least, what 67 is going to look like simply because of my belief and the actions that I'm taking? And basically that's what it all boils down to in life, what you believe. See, a lot of times we go to the preachers or we go to the motivational speakers and they tell you just believe it and make it manifest, and we think just repeating it. But the fact is, you have to believe it. Believing it isn't just wishing it. Believing it isn't just saying it. Believing it is that you truly believe it, and what you believe will manifest. Doctors will show you people have believed themselves right out of sicknesses. You can believe yourself right out of poverty. Believe yourself right out of ill health, right out of ill finances. You just have to believe it. And that's the issue. And so what I'm suggesting is, and in closing, be grateful. So whatever the situation is, that I've shared with you today is as hypothesized based on my observations from a spiritual perspective and a scientific perspective, But the key in any way is believing. And so how do you believe? How do you cross over from just wishing a thing to actually believing it? You don't just say, I believe it, I believe it, I believe it, I believe it. That isn't believing it. You don't have to say it to believe it if you just believe it in your heart, okay? And so what I would suggest then, if there's something that you desire, something that you want in your life, that is within reason, You're not going to jump off a building and fly, I wouldn't suggest that at all. But within reason, just determine that's what you desire. And then determine that's what you are. And then every day, just be thankful that's what you are. I would even verbalize the thanks, because in the beginning, you're not really going to believe it. You're going to be wishing, but the more you verbalize it, that wishing is going to turn into believing. And that will be your reality. Now, the caveat is, and this is where most of us fail, is we don't realize the responsibility that we have to making a thing come to fruition, not just to believing, but just to affecting our environment. And maybe, technically this is believing, because we need to make sure the environment that we have created for ourselves is conducive to that thing that we want, that we believe that we are, believing that we're going to attain. So if I'm believing I'm free from alcohol addiction, I'm not going to keep alcohol in my house. I'm not going to be going to a bar drinking with my buddies or just watching them drink while I'm drinking a soda. No, I'm removing myself from all those issues. I'm not going to finish this bag of weed. I'm going to dump it out. I'm not going to finish the pack of cigarettes. I'm going to throw them out. You have to determine that this is what I am, and then be grateful for it. Every day, this is what I am, this is what I am, this is what I have, this is what I have, and that will be it. And I want to give you a bit of encouragement. Don't lament when life changes occur. Because if you're walking positively, if you're walking in the right mindset, being good to people, doing all the positive things that you're supposed to be doing, positive is going to manifest. That's another unique characteristic of us. We bring negativity on ourselves by functioning negative. Right? Now, this is not the entanglement. This is not uncertainty, but this is something else. Maybe we'll make a name for it. But the reality is, there is cause and there is an effect, and how you respond determines what the effect is going to be. When you are good, There are good effects. When you are bad, there are bad effects. So we need to be conducting our lives in such a way that we are good. We can't be nasty to people. We can't be using people. We can't be harmful to people. We can't be lying. We can't be cheating. We can't be deceiving. We can't be doing all these negative things and expect the positive is going to manifest. We have to be intentional. We have to be good. And that's the issue we have, and that's almost the balance that we have. When we see it in our politics. We see negativity, we see hate, we see vitriol, we see an apathy for the concern, for other people's well-being. And the same with the religions. We have this segregated time. You go into hell, you go into hell, you ain't right, you didn't baptize right, you ain't doing this, you ain't doing that. And that's just within a religion. But then you look at all across the religions, you have all kinds of negativity done in the name of religion, which is in the name of God or Allah, Yahweh, whatever. But the reality is we're using the religions that were man-created, attributing them to the intelligence that may have manifested us all here, and we're reaping negativity. And half the time we don't even know why. So try to live well. Try to live good. Be kind. Be decent. And have your aspirations. I know a lot of people want to be married, that are getting up in age because they've put time into education, put time into a particular career and all this stuff. And I've spoken to quite a few people that are like in the 50 and 60 year range, and their reason for wanting to be married is because they didn't want to be alone when they were old. Well, that's kind of selfish. Adjust that just a little bit. Determine that you want to help someone else not have to be alone in their old age. That person that will be, your spouse. Instead of looking at it, what it will do for me, begin considering what you could do for someone else. That's the ultimate goodness. Okay, that's the ultimate grace. When we start talking about, I don't want to leave a tip for the waiter or waitress. Cling, cling, you just got some negativity on you. Man, I give tips over meals that are times more than the meal cost. Why? Because I recognize the waiter or waitress isn't making much money and I'm good. So I'm grateful. When you are grateful, you are going to be gracious toward other people. And that graciousness is going to bring on positively. I believe it's part of our unique traits as elements in this universal mix, that whenever we do good, good manifests. Whenever we do bad, bad manifests. Man, they can probably name a concept or a theory after that. But this is all part of the quantum physics, I believe. These are just some of the unique character traits that are about us, we, as human beings, as spiritually animated, the spiritual part of us, which is part of this universal mix. I'm telling you, man, I've gone on, and I could go on and on and on. So we're just have to reserve for the next program. But I do want to thank you. You consider some of this stuff. I want to thank you for joining me for another perspective. And I want you to invite you to join me again. You take care.